Yeah, it's connecting and
Over to you. You can start, sir.
okay. Just give me one sec. Let me arrange some of the windows. All right, okay. So, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Asfar, and I guess Saad Bhai initiated this thread of cloud computing WhatsApp group, and I've been observing that group to be very active for last at least 10 to 12 months, and I've seen the size of the group has grown significantly. So this is something which is very close to me because I've been on the same journey, and whenever anybody posts any question, I kind of felt as if I could add or respond, but something or the other would always come, and I was never having the time to respond back in length. So I think most of the attendees on the group know what we are trying to do here, but the idea here is to kind of walk over the path that I followed, and it did result. Into an area where I actually wanted to grow into in my career. So I thought, why not to just kind of share some time with every single one of you so that some of you guys may benefit, or at least we all can learn. I can learn from you guys, and I can hope that I can answer some of the questions that were actually posted in a survey. So I thought maybe within 1 hour, we'll follow this agenda where I'm going to start to introduce myself first. Um, I'm going to share as to who I am, why you guys should be giving one another hour over the weekend to something that I had to say and share. I also made one thing very specific about this particular call because this is a diverse group of people on the group. Sadhbhai, if you could mute yourself. So I wanted to make sure that we have a survey which actually covers some of the questions. And based on that survey, this whole session would be more interactive. It will be more engaging. It will be more relatable to most of you. So we're going to reflect on the survey, which does touch some of the important points that most of you were kind of reaching out to me on. Um, and after going to the survey, you will see a particular pattern, which is very common, which is very reflective of what we all are going through. So we're going to touch that. Some of the tips which I hoped that I had when I was kind of um, early in my career, early in my journey towards the cloud side. And then I'll leave the last part of the call for any questions. I hope that I addressed most of the questions, but I still want to leave some time in the end for any questions that may not be addressed over the call. So with that being discussed, is anybody having any questions? Anybody who's not able to hear me? I'll just take a quick pause and I have a chat window open. So please feel free to drop any questions if you guys have any while I'm going through the presentation. I do have a habit of talking at a pace. So if I'm not audible or if I am kind of very fast in my presentation, just feel free to chat and drop a text on the chat window, and I'm going to repeat that because this session is for you. Okay, so a little bit about me. As some of you or most of you know, my name is Asfar. I know some of you guys because I have exchanged messages. I've spoken to some of you, so I know you guys by name. But for the larger audience who do not know me, my name is Asfar. And a little bit about myself as to why I think I should be sharing some of the stuff that I learned. So I'm going to share what my career has been. I'm an electrical engineer by training. I did my bachelor's almost 12 to 13 years ago. In fact, 14 years ago now. And then I've been working professionally since then. I worked in the telco space in the start of my career between Middle East and in Asia. I did work in the operations, in the planning and designing, and most specifically on the vendor solutions, which is Juniper, Cisco, Huawei, Ericsson. And then following that, I joined Juniper Networks close to 2013. And within Juniper Networks, I kind of moved within Juniper EMEA, Europe, Middle East, to Juniper North America. And this is how I landed my job with Juniper Networks in Toronto. So I immigrated to Canada in 2014, and I had been working for the last 7 years and 8 months with Juniper. I just moved out of Juniper last month. So I started a new cloud specific role in a company called SADA. Going back to some of the things, I did my MBA from University of Toronto back in 2017. It was an executive program. During my time of career, I did some certifications like CCIE. Some of you who come from telco background and networking space, you guys might be aware of it. And then there's a similar certification in Juniper called JNCIE. So I'm triple JNCIE. So this was all in my career, which was the earlier part of my career, which is more about on-prem solutions, telco space, data center architectures. But over time, when I started to look into cloud side of the world, so from 2018, or I should say 2019 January, is when I actually took a serious approach of moving into cloud. And that is where the certifications around Amazon and Google and Azure. Um, so please, anybody who is not having any questions, please mute yourself. So yeah, I did some certifications around the public clouds, and then I developed some interest in the containerization side of the things. So I went and I did my Kubernetes certification from CNCF. So that's high level. This was important because the later half of the session is going to be discussing about why the certifications are important and how they add value. Over the course of 13 years, I did pre-sales, post-sales positions in the technical space. I did some business development in terms of services and support. So it has been hybrid. So I like to put it this way, that in any technology space, you have certain people who are very good in the operation space, which is typically the post-sales side of the business. Some of the guys are really good in pre-sales. It's not for everyone, but I was fortunate and lucky to have worked in both the side of the things, and I have developed certain skill set from both sides of the things. So this is just my background. On the right is for you guys to connect on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is definitely a tool I use very regularly, and I'm very responsive on LinkedIn. So please feel free to be connected on that platform. So the following few slides are all about survey. I do want to say thank you to all of you because I got 21 responses, and I know it takes time. I wanted to make it short. It did not cover all the questions, but I think it did cover some of the important questions which I really needed, because I wanted to get a sense of where and who is the audience and what sort of kind of audience I'm dealing with, so that I can have a messaging tailored to those particular questions that are coming from the survey. There is a particular pattern from the audience, and I'm going to touch those two. So this is what I know from the group. So there are two particular bars. I would say close to 40% of the people are between 2 to 5 years of experience. So I think they're relatively new. Someone who has been just graduated a few years ago. Some of you guys have been experienced for a longer time, 10 plus years. So it could be 10 plus 1 or 10 plus 10. We don't know, but it's a long time. 10-year plus is always a lot of experience. What is your occupation today? So I got a lot of people texting and telling about who they are, what they have done. But if you look at the pie chart, there's a 45% distribution among project manager and technical analysts. So technical analysts, I would not know the specifics, but I would put 45% out of the pie saying that they are non-cloud roles. Technical analyst, I would say it's something who can have a lesser ramp up time to get to the cloud skills, but let me put that in the bucket that it's non-cloud kind of role. So 45% of this group who gave me the inputs of the survey are non-cloud people. There's a very small percentage of consultant who are solution architects today. So you could see the small pie, the red color pie. So it's a small pie. So very less people are in cloud solution architect role today. My next question was, do you hold any cloud certifications? So it was not specific to any particular cloud. It was any cloud. So it could be any three, or it could be Salesforce or IBM or Alibaba. So I see a huge number of count, which is 66% saying no. So that itself is descriptive of the audience, that people are kind of either A, they haven't started the journey yet, or B, they know the stuff, but they haven't taken the exams. So that is also one thing to be mindful of. Rate your cloud knowledge. This is an interesting one because what I've learned over time is if I'm telling myself as 3, either I should be 5 or I should be 1. Typically, we are very conservative in terms of putting our skill set on the table, or we are very ambitious. So in either case, I would just buy these numbers as we have shared. So there is 42% of you guys who rate yourself as 2. So that's kind of new in the journey. And there's a 20%, a good size of the people who consider themselves as 4 out of 5. So that's good to know because I'm going to learn from you guys, every single one of you. So pick the cloud you're most familiar with. So again, Microsoft and Amazon are clearly the 65%. I would say it's equally divided between the two of those two clouds. When it comes to GCP, it's a smaller number, and others are all 15%. So we all know why those two clouds are big. Amazon being the pioneer, primarily reason for Amazon is that they were the first one to come into the market, so they have acquired a bigger market cap. That is why we see them growing significantly globally. And the Microsoft is the second who joined the cloud space, especially in the cloud side of the world and the services side of the business. And second, because of their on-prem dominance. So for Azure to move towards the cloud, it's an easy step for customers. So that's why there's a huge shift towards Azure. So that's why you see that relatively more in the market. The second question, please feel free to mute yourself. Some of you guys have forgotten to mute, so just a quick reminder. The next question is around experience in cloud. So my question was, do you have experience in cloud? I did not specifically mention private or public. I just mentioned cloud, and I did that intentionally because I wanted to get a sense of anyone who's familiar with virtualization. So in the end, we're going to touch this question again because some of you guys would have thought that this is only public, but we're going to discuss this in the end. So as the results said, 62%, close to 62% of you guys are not in the cloud industry or do not have experience with cloud. So yeah, so I just wanted to bring some of the important points that we just visited. So most of you are 10-year in experience. A majority of you are project manager or technical analyst. 70% are not certified. So that's a big number. Almost most of you. That's a lingo error. So most of you have rated yourself 2 out of 5. So I would say 2 out of 5 is again, we're going to discuss this in our Q&A session in the end. When you say 2 out of 5, is it because you guys have not looked into it, or you guys have looked into it and you guys don't understand that? So that's something we'll discuss more and more. AWS and Azure are the most common skill set. What does that tell? I think we did address this in the field sites earlier. A lot of people do find Amazon to be relatively a public cloud, which is having a biggest market cap. So that's why people who have done some projects or people who have done some certification, so they're comfortable with AWS. Azure is again one of the other cloud, second biggest for the same reasons. This was an interesting statistic. So almost 71, greater than 71% of you want to be solution architect. So I am really interested to know why is that so? Because we did see a lot of people don't have cloud experience. We do see a lot of people actually are not cloud savvy. 45% or something around those was distributed among technical specialists and project manager. But when it comes around, what do you want to do? Solution architect is predominantly the biggest role that you want to pick for yourself. So I would be interested to know as to why do you want to be a solution architect? There's so many other roles in the cloud space. And then some of you or most of you are in cloud, which means that again, some of you guys are on private cloud, public cloud, or one way or the other, you are associated with cloud today. So that's an interesting key point. So some questions, let me maximize the window, I guess. Yeah. So I had a last comment or last question, which was additional questions or any comments that some of you would have wanted to ask. And I did see some of the questions. So I'm in career transition phase and working for GCP. I need to understand the cloud industry in future, how to enhance skills to take advantage. The other question was, I was working in CIBC. I am working in CIBC as a technical analyst and want to learn cloud. The other two is a typo, or I guess it's not clear. How can those from non-IT backgrounds, example, business analyst, realistically transition to a meaningful cloud role? What is the path to take? Thank you. So the last question, I really didn't understand because realistically transition to a meaningful cloud. So I don't understand what meaningful word means here, but I guess we're going to have a session to discuss these questions and we're going to discuss more. So again, let me just quickly check. Yeah, so I think at this point, we all know as to what the pattern is. I see a lot of people who are either fresh in their career or they are 10 plus years in their career. So that's the two bigger audience sample people that I would say in this group. And then second thing, which is important, is most of you or almost majority of you want to be in solution architect role. Um, One of the other important thing that I did see in the chat, in some of you guys who have reached out to me individually, and from this questionnaire is that everybody wants to pivot towards cloud or at least move towards cloud. So why it is something which resonates with me is because, as I mentioned, I have been working in the technical industry for over 13, 14 years. 2019 is when I finished my MBA. And there was a time when I thought that I want to go and do non-technical stuff, but it took me a couple of months to realize that technical stuff is I enjoy and I like doing. So that's why I came back. And at the time I wanted to go towards cloud. So I was in the same shoes as you were. So I did a few things and I learned, I failed, I reached out to many people. Some of the conversations were really important. They were really insightful. Some of them were not really helpful because it was more around people not were not really sure as to how it's going to turn around. Um, I can share what I did and what really worked for me. And if I'll tell you that 2 years ago I had doubts about doing anything, one thing that clearly find out is that there is no shortcut. There is definitely no shortcut. There is going to be a lot of planning. There's going to be a lot of things that you would have to do, and it's a gradual process. Um, so I'm confident. In the next slide, I'm going to share some of the tips that I did, and inshallah, I'm hopeful that you guys will get the right job. You guys will do the things that you want to do, and you will learn. So feel free to pivot at any point in time. If you think today that you want to be a solution architect, I would not be surprised that you guys on your journey would not want to do or would not want to be solution architect for other roles, because there are so many other roles in the cloud space. We're going to discuss that too. So one thing which is really important is that solution architect is overhyped word. Um, and I would say people, for the lack of better word, they just want to put themselves a solution architect. So there are a few things that I want to understand, and this is where I want you guys to either chat or please feel free to um, put yourself off the mute and address some of the questions. So I really want this audience to address any of these four questions. So it could be anyone typing 1, 2, 3, 4, or anybody just who's comfortable to come onto the mic and share. So I really want to understand from any one of you, especially for those who are in the cloud space. Um, why most of you want to be a solution architect? So this question is more about those people who are not in cloud or relatively new in the industry, or some of you guys who actually are still not aware of cloud, but they have 73% of or 72% of you have picked cloud role to be solution architect. So I would really want to understand as to why do you want to be solution architect. Second, I would want to understand if you want to be a specialist or generalist. By that, I mean that in the cloud space, there are people who are very technology specific, which means that someone who's coming from data background, they would not want to do security. They would want to continue doing data science, big data, and they want to be specialists in that particular field. So some of you guys would want to continue in that fashion. Some of you are not having expertise onto only one vertical, rather they want to be journalists. So these are the guys who know a breadth of technology versus depth of technology. So how many of you think that you are not specialists, but you are good journalists because you guys have worked for many years, 10 plus years or more, and you guys have a good understanding of technology from different sides of the business? Um, what do you have in your arsenal to sell the hiring manager? So I think this is one really important question. So given an opportunity, if I am a hiring manager right now, I would want to know as to what is that you have, which is convincing enough for me to hire you for a role. So that is something that I really want to understand if you guys have figured that answer for that question. And why should you be hired? Because you're aware that the cloud is a very competitive industry. A lot of people who are in the cloud space are developing solutions at a much faster pace. So if the opportunity comes, you really want to be on your A game. So that itself is just not enough. What is that competitive thing in you for which you will be hired? So I think those are the top four questions that I would want to anyone who knows the answers to this question, please feel free to put off yourself from the mic because this has to be interactive. I want to address the questions and I want to kind of get a sense of it. Or perhaps we can come back to this slide in the end. So just text me in the chat or let me know if you want to take this session now or you want to do this in the end. Okay. So I guess I will continue in the slides. I think we're gonna come to this once we all start to, okay, in the end. Okay, so as I mentioned in this chart, so let's address the elephant in the room. I can tell you from my experience, there are no shortcuts. Now, I know that you already know, this is not something I'm telling you first time, but I really mean there are no shortcuts, which means there's a huge ramp up time to get to the cloud. Solution architect, which is the most demanding or most desirable role that most of you want, I would say this is the most toughest position to get to because you will see people who have been in the cloud side of the world for 10 years, 15 years. That's the age of the public clouds anyways. They are still solution architect because it's such a demanding position and it comes with so much of skill set that people typically just want to continue doing that. And I can add this from my experience, solution architect is just not only limited to technical expertise. There's a lot of consulting skill set needed in solution architect roles. There's a lot of business acumen because solution architect is not only about building a solution and selling it. It's a consumption model, which means that you're not building something, you're actually giving a piece of the pie for the customer. So it's something which is already there. Yes, you are plumbing the tools. You are kind of connecting the small pieces, but that changes every single time. Whereas in the legacy or monolithic or the older world of data centers, typically a sales cycle is a lot different. You go through a sales cycle, you do a whiteboarding, you sell the product, and that's it. The sales team is out. Then it's the post-sales team who are just helping and supporting. Cloud side is different. Cloud is not something that you sell and you're out. The idea is that when you sell, you want to also penetrate and you want to make sure that it's consumables because it's a pay as you grow model. On the day one, you're not selling anything. You're not getting any dollars for your product. So that means you need to be competitive. You need to be smart. You need to understand the business side of the things too. The solution architect is a very, very demanding role. But having said that, that does not mean that you cannot be a solution architect. I'm sure a lot of people are today solution architects in your position, in your profession. And you also want to grow into solution architect roles for the big three public clouds or for bigger companies like banks and telcos specifically, or any other organization. So this was the one question that I did not know in the start. I thought that I had done certifications. I have experience globally. I have done MBA, so I know both business and technical. But I'll tell you that when I went and I did, even after doing Azure fundamentals, even after doing a lot of trainings on Linux Academy and other publicly available tools, I did happen to sit in front of one of the senior most cloud solution architect of Azure. He's one contact that I had to reach out to after a lot of effort, and I'm going to share that tips too. But when I had that 30-minute session with him one-on-one, I can tell you it was 30 minutes was all about just go and learn the basics. And this is me sitting in front of him after 6 months of study. So two things happened then. One, I wasn't convincing enough to actually articulate my message as to why he should give me more time and why am I valuable to his team. And second, cloud solution architect role is itself huge and it has a lot of components that you can only learn either by building solutions or by doing something in-house. So what do I mean when I say this? This is something that I'm going to tell in the next slide. What I did in the start is I picked one cloud. I think someone asked me how to find the right cloud. I think that question is irrelevant because there is no right or wrong cloud. Cloud is cloud. Technologies are more open source driven, most of them at least. And the fundamental architecture piece doesn't change. So you start with one cloud and then start to understand as to where your strengths are. Let's say if you want to be a journalist. So now when you're a journalist, you need to think of, okay, what does a journalist do? Journalist is someone who understands the technology breadth. He's someone who can understand the packet flow from the very start till the end, which means that the packet from an application perspective, it's going to cross many layers. It's going to cross the front end, the back end. It's going to go to the data analytics side of the business. So let me take a step back and explain what do I mean by that. So when you talk about journalists, they are the ones who are not specialists in any vertical, but they understand the whole flow of the service. So let's say it's a small service. Let's say let's talk about Netflix. So let's say you are kind of building Netflix application. It's very common. Most of you know this. Almost all of you would know this. It's a TV streaming app. So as a consumer of an application, Netflix, let's say someone comes to you and say, I want to build Netflix. So you need to think about how do I build Netflix? So that means that now you need to think of the application, which will be on different platforms, which mean it will be on television, it will be on computer, it will be on the mobile phone. So you need to think about different architectures based on where the application is residing. In either of those three applications, you need to think about how the traffic is going to be serviced. So you need to think about the internet connectivity because that application is going to host and reside on any public cloud. AWS primarily hosts Netflix. So now you need to think about how do the consumers are connecting to the public cloud. So you will start to think about front end technologies, which will include the user interface, which will include the application logic, which is going to include all the security measures which needs to go into the front end. So you need to think about that first. Then they're going to be web application based load balancers. So now you're not thinking about scalability. You're thinking about things as how when the user count is going to grow from 100 to 1000 to 10,000 to a million to 10 millions. You need to think about that as to how you're going to architect your model. Then you're going to talk about the packet flow going all the way to the end. So let's say if this application is requesting a movie or a video content which has not been seen, then you need to think about your architecture in a different fashion because the request is going to go all the way to the back end and the content is going to be pulled out. But if the same request is coming for the second time, you need to think about caching architecture because now you want to reduce the network calls, you want to reduce the latency. And the idea is not to go into deep weeds, but I'm just kind of giving you a very high level example here is that a solution architect journalist would start to ask these questions. They will ask about what is your security requirements? How are you hosting your applications today? What do you really want to do in the public cloud? What's your cost modeling like? What are the particular audiences? What geography you want to continue? What is your fault tolerant architecture? What is your resiliency? What is your scalability? How do you want to keep the upgrade path? What's your data backup strategy? How are you going to keep the snapshots? What are your compliance requirements? What sort of security measurements are you going to take? And then you can go down deep. So that would be a very high level job for a journalist. So he would be something who's going to be aware of the whole back end to end technology flow. There is no one who knows everything, but journalist would be someone who would not be a specialist. That's the easier way I like to put it. So you need to think about that today because it is based on your experience as how you have done things in the past and all about your attitude. Some people really like to do one thing and they are really deep. So they will go all the way down in the deep weeds and understand that machine learning is something I want to do. I know it's the right technology. I like it. When I read, I understand. So maybe you want to go there. Someone like me who likes to touch the different flavors. I'm a journalist by my experience and my skill set. So I like to go all the way to the end. I do have some certain strength in some areas, but I like to call myself as journalist. So put yourself in one of those two buckets. And that will only be evident once you start to learn the technology, learn the training courses, because that is when you will have the first interface of what is storage, what is database, what is DNS, how the networking works, what's the different migration tools out there, what are the security requirements. Some people are really good at security. So let me address 3 points. Start with one cloud. There is no right or wrong cloud. Pick one cloud. Now, a lot of you may ask, which cloud should we pick? I would say the first and foremost way to pick a cloud is by actually going online and looking into the data available online. What sort of data exists? You have paid programs like Udemy, A Cloud Guru, Linux Academy. There are many, many portals where you get those certification training programs. Start to go and skim over it. Otherwise, reach out to people onto this group. They're going to help you understand which course is easy to read. It's for beginners, it's for advanced. So start to go through that process. That is when you will start to understand which cloud is good and easy, understandable. I personally believe any cloud that you pick first is going to take some time. But then if you pivot from one to the second or third cloud, it's not going to be much different. A lot of the clouds are same. There's just 10 to 15% of proprietary stuff that every cloud does. But rest 85% is just an overlap. Second, you really need to be smart in picking out if you want to be a journalist or a specialist. I think that is really important. You can start with being journalist, and over time you'll find yourself in your sweet spot. You'll start yourself that I am more. It's more easy for me to go and learn security. I want to learn more security because this is all back to the question that we were discussing. You really need to be sure when you're sitting in front of the hiring manager or any influential person who is looking to hire people, you need to be very articulate about what is that you bring to the table. It could be technology, it could be cloud, but you need to get that messaging right. And that is going to be starting from this point. Learn the tools. I think this is the most important. So when you look at tools, there are two sides of things. There is front end versus back end. So there are front end engineers who are actually the ones who are doing stuff like, you know, Node.js, Java, Angular, um, Go language. So they are the ones who are typically developers who are actually writing the code, the application logic. It could be thin or thick clients. It could be, you know, different clients for different consumption model. As I said, iPad has a different architecture for the front end. Mobile phone is different, and within mobile phone there are different flavors: iOS, Android, and others. So front end is mostly about that part. It doesn't limit to only the UI UX, but it goes a little further. And that is one thing which front end engineers are typically good with. Back end is all about what happens in the back end, which means what is happening in the database, what is happening in the storage, how is the data stored, how is the data processed, how are you going to connect the different networks within the cloud, outside of cloud, how are you going to secure traffic end to end. So this is where the backend side of the business come. And backend is typically breadth of technologies, which I've listed in the right, in the last line. And then there are tools. There are tools like infrastructure as code because automation is on the rise. It has always been on the rise. It's only going to get more and more efficient. People like to do things. They don't want to repeat them. They want the process to be repeatable. They want the process to be self-automated. So there's going to be more and more demand for it. I myself am terrible at coding, but I had to take that pill in that no shortcut mentality. So that's where I went back to Terraform and Docker and Ansible. These are not really programming languages, but these are more automating languages for doing a lot of tasks. That skill was needed because if you go and you sell yourself as a good compute or networking guy, guess what? It's not going to be sufficient because if you know networking good, but you cannot automate that process for other people to benefit from, you're not adding value to the team. So what you really need to be smart and be efficient about is about how do you make your skill set more repeatable and more usable for others. That is one thing which hiring managers really love. Once you're doing your job, if you find a way to make it more automated and more effective for the others, they're going to just love that skill, and that itself is going to sell your profile. So that's something which I would encourage you guys to start to look into. So the first thing is infra versus DevOps. I explained that, or SecOps, which is more security operations, front end versus back end, journalists versus specialists, and then the tools. I did not go into any particular tools because I wanted to bring some of the most relevant, and this is not an exhaustive list. Just because I haven't been in the industry for many, many years. It's just still my third year into the industry, and I'm kind of finding my way. But these are the most common tools that are used. So Terraform is one from HashiCorp. It's really simple. It's very intuitive. The sources are their website, terraform.io, Ansible, Tower on the Ansible website, kubernetes.io. So these are the tools which are really important, and it's very simply written. If I have done it, I guess most of you guys will be easily able to do it. And if there's a ramp up time, so be it. There is no rush. You have to be smart. You don't want to just learn and say, I've learned it, and then go back. Then when the time comes, you should be aware and comfortable with these technologies. Cloud SDKs, there's a G Cloud Shell, there's PowerShell, there are others. That is also important because some of the projects that you'll be working with the customers, they would want you to be aware of those tooling. It is easy because once you do it by mouse clicks, You can take the templates and you can use that by automating the different tools. So start to build, start to learn these tools. And I'm going to address a quick tip in the end, which is going to make the sense of all of these tooling. Kubernetes, the two tools that I've mentioned is HCX and GCVE. I don't I don't expect the audience to know this. If you do, it's great. But it's relatively more VMware tools. And I'm raising that here because a lot of the people who are kind of in the cloud space today, these are the tools that bigger companies are producing today, which is helping the customers to move to the cloud. The GCVE is Google Compute Virtual Machine Engine on the ESXi, which is actually taking the ESXi host on-prem, taking it as is into GCP. Something which is very incredible in terms of how customers can benefit from the ESXi environment hosted on public cloud. Something which is sellable, something which is happening at much faster pace, and I can tell you, it's going to continue for the next 1 to 2 years. So if you think about those solutions, because you need to think about 6 months from now, when you know these technologies, 6 months from now, when you have identified the answers that you want to be front end versus back end, journalists, specialists, and you're good at Terraform, but you are not good with Ansible. Once you know those sellable skills, you can particularly pick GCVE. There's a lot of content available online, and you can start to learn about it. Having those technology understanding on your resume is gonna catch attention of hiring managers because they're gonna find people short in the market who would not know GCE, GCVE, or HCX. So it's not only one product, there are many others. I'm just giving you one example that you need to be mindful of understanding what's selling in the market. What is that people, it's a demand and supply question. There is a lot of demand for these products, there's not much supply because these are ever evolving technologies. A lot of people are kind of learning still because it's new and there's not many skill sets. So this is for more advanced people who are in the cloud world today, who have been doing this for more than 4 years, who are solution architect today, and they want to just go in a bigger organization with much more technical challenges. So it could be somewhere around those. On-prem architectures like VMware and OpenShift for on-prem cloud, if you guys really know how that works, I would say it's a good way to start building applications. That is something which a lot of hiring managers really like for the new candidates to have. And you can actually do that on your laptop or in your small server in home. I have a small lab here. I've done some solutions. I've built some solutions. I've learned by making mistakes and just by Googling the solutions, because a lot of the times the solutions are already written. There's a lot of blogs, there's a lot of content on LinkedIn, there's a lot of GitHub repos. Everything is documented, every single step is documented. All you need to do is find one particular project and just run through it. When you will run through that project, you'll fail, and eventually you'll end up making an application. It does not have to be any particular cloud, it does not have to be any particular app, it could be anything, which could be very basic. So start from there. What I did is the following. So I first and foremost started to understand myself as being which cloud is the best cloud for me, um, which tools should I start to learn, where is the content. So I started with Linux Academy. I bought the 1 year subscription. I went through a lot of courses. And then from that courses, I kind of understood as to what cloud system is. At that time, I thought I understood, but even today, I still don't understand because cloud is huge. It's not gonna just go away. It's just gonna grow over time. So the positions are always gonna be there. The use cases will differ. So cutting the chase, you really need to understand few things. How do you get the information? How do you sell yourself by actually building projects? And what do you do next? So there's a three-step formula. Start to learn by actually subscribing to A Cloud Guru, Udemy, Linux Academy, other certification tools by checking with friends in the group. So that's the learning process. The second is the developing process. This is where you will have to write codes yourself. You don't have to write by yourself. You actually can copy and paste. You don't have to develop, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Just start to capture the notes from someone who has written and then push them in your repo. If you guys would go into my LinkedIn, you'll see that I've done some repo work in my LinkedIn. I've posted that link. I did some of the projects by actually copying, pasting, and then took one project A, took one project B, took some pieces of A, took some pieces of B, and kind of made my own project. And I learned a few more things. So start to develop those solutions. So you learn something, you develop something, and then it's the time to sell, which means that now you need to be really productive in terms of LinkedIn and GitHub. These are not the only two tools, but these are the two tools which actually has a lot of weight on your resume. If you are kind of positioning your message in your cover letter that here is my work on GitHub, here is my LinkedIn profile, and you have those certifications and you have those work done, I can tell you you're already um, ahead of the curve, because not that only you have studied, but actually you have developed. So you will start to learn more and more use cases. One thing about certifications, I would say that certification is definitely needed for two reasons. Number one, when you certify yourself, that's a stamp. A lot of people do value points when you are certified on the resume. It holds a lot of weight. So I will definitely encourage you to pick any certification that you can start with. And second, by going through the certification program, you learn. You learn many things which you won't do in your other way in your experience. Like I would never build a big data solution. I would never have a machine learning GPUs in my home lab so that I can learn the machine learning analytics. But because of the exams, I would have to touch those topics and I would know a little bit about it. So learn, develop, and then sell yourself through LinkedIn and through GitHub by posting your work, which you have developed, and then being socializing, reaching out to different people, telling them that this is what you have been doing. What are they doing in the organization? Some of your friends would be in the cloud space. Start to talk to them, ask them important, tough questions, because you will learn those questions when you're going to go through the whole program. So with that, I will take a pause and I'll welcome you guys for the 15 minutes for any questions. So please shoot any questions and do let me know if I didn't address any of the points. Well, let me ask you another question. Did you guys hear me well? Was I audible? The last thing I want is nobody able to hear
Yes,
me.
yes, you're absolutely audible.
Is
And
this
thank you.
Rizwan? Is this Dr. Riz?
No,
No,
this
that
is
wasn't me.
Anas.
Hi, Afsar. This is Ali. I joined late. Sorry for that. Thank you very much. Very interesting sessions. And I like the question that you asked and the overall assessment of the survey. So I just want to talk about myself, about the question that you asked. So I have almost 15 years of experience, and my major areas where I worked was in infrastructure management, mostly on on-premise and physical and virtual infrastructure. I have good overview about backend and front-end infrastructure. Backend, I have the storage, network, databases, and the front end is the desktop computing, web servers, and all these environments. But for the last 3 years, I am working as a project manager on infrastructure technologies and consulting role. So I want to move towards cloud. Like the reason I want to learn because I have a good overview. Technically, I have knowledge, but in the cloud, I have not worked a lot. So I want to learn more on the general side, not on the specialties. So what do you recommend me? Because what I'm doing right now is mostly on the projects for it's a project management role on infrastructure side, which is physical and virtual environments. So I want to be more on the cloud side. So my overall
So,
Objective is to go towards the general, not the
uh,
special.
sure. So this is Ali, right? If I
Yeah,
caught the full name
exactly.
right. Okay. So Ali, my question to you would be: you want to move towards the cloud as a project manager with what you have been doing, or you want to move as a solution architect, more technical?
I want to continue as a project manager, but I want to learn cloud as well.
Sure, definitely. I think two things for you to decide that you want to move towards cloud and project manager is the first fundamental um, shift when it comes to doing projects
Yeah.
in both agile and waterfall method on the on-prem or in the old world, not the old world but non-cloud world,
Yeah.
versus something that is doable on the cloud side. I am actually pulled into 5 different projects, and I can say it is super agile. It's not
Mm.
only agile, it's super agile. I mean, like we have actually uh, I would say we were reviewing the SOW, scope of work document, and by the end of 3 calls, it branched out to 4 different SOWs. So that's how agile things are. Coming back to your question, I would say the first thing that at least I did, and again, I'm not project manager, but I've seen people doing this similar trend, is first and foremost try to pick the projects within your organization. You did mention that you have done this in your previous life, and you have a good understanding of infrastructure, both physical and
Yeah.
virtual. So that's all value add points, because for someone like you who have done this for many years and is fairly comfortable about the differences around the cost structuring for both virtual and physical, you do understand, and you understand the billing aspect of it. You
Yeah.
understand the execution aspect of it, because physical is all about inventory, shipping, and many other things which comes into the physical environments, whereas virtual is all about software package with licensing and pay-as-you-go modeling. So it's different. So there are a couple of things that you can do. Number one, if you have done some projects in the virtual space in your current organization,
Yeah.
start to understand as to how that changes from a physical side. Like if somebody asks you, and this definitely would be raised in your interviews, inshallah, when you're going for a project manager positions in the cloud space, is how is it different? Like what would you do differently? Like I can tell you example of someone who is doing sales engineering leadership in the old organizations I've worked. He was being interviewed for Google Cloud, and out of the 5 interviews he was interviewed, the only one interview which he thought he's going to knock out of the park was around presentation of cloud consumption model. So the only question that was asked to him was, how will you define the matrix for measuring the cloud consumption? That was just one question. And he failed to respond to that question for 45 minutes. So sometimes it's just that small mentality as to how things change. I'm giving example of sales is because the capex versus opex
Yeah.
is a huge shift in terms of public cloud versus on-prem solutions.
Yeah.
As I said, pre-sales is
Yeah.
about just packaging solution and you're done. Cloud is different. So think about those questions as how project managers who are doing a cloud projects are different than the ones something like yourself who are doing it on-prem. Once you identify those kind of opportunities within your organization, it's just going to give you more and more knowledge. Let's say you don't have that experience. Let's say in your company there are no opportunities. I would rather start to look and pair with the people to have those dialogues. Once you start to have those dialogue with project managers who are in those space, start to ask those questions. Start to understand what would it take you to pick those projects, or what challenges will you face. Let's say imagining you are running a you are a project manager for AWS. What would be your first 30, 60, 90 days problems? Do you know those questions? Do you know how it changes? I would first and foremost start to address that question, because there will be a time when you'll be sitting in front of the interviewer and you will be selling yourself. So letting them know that you already know the challenges that people have on-prem versus in public cloud is going to be a sell for you. So start to investigate onto those questions by doing two things. Start to pick up the projects in your organization. If you have them, that is the easiest and more effective way. If not, start to understand what particular things vary when public cloud. So by reaching out to the people who are doing similar roles. One thing for everybody here is that there are many smaller partner companies. Like the organization that I'm working for is called SADA, and they are the gold partner for GCP globally for the last 3 years. Um, 11 out of 13 projects in North America was done by SADA among anything outside of GCP. So GCP will do the projects themselves, but with COVID, they have a lot of projects and they can't execute everything on their own. So they will hand it over to a certain premium partners. 11 out of 13 were done by SADA. So I've seen huge organizations like SADA and others who have a lot of agile projects. It could be, so go to any public cloud partners. You'll see a lot of different branches of organizations. These are small organizations, but not as small as a small enterprise. There will be like 500 to 1,000 to 10,000 people. So they are pretty decent organizations. They have actual work of public cloud and they have positions. So this applies to everybody on the bridge. It's not specific to early. Start to look into those organizations. Start to look for the jobs there, and don't get afraid to go an interview round. I can tell you, within last 6 months, and I'm not exaggerating, I have been interviewed 40 times. I do get calls and I said yes. And whenever I had a 30 minutes window in my calendar, I just went through the interviews, because every single time when you go through the interview round, you either answer or you learn. So you start to go back and reverse engineer. Why are they asking these questions? Why are they looking for certain skills in the position? So that is one another way to start looking into roles, not specific to PM, but anyone else.
All right. This is Dr. Rizwan Asfar. I'd like to add some stuff to what you said. If may I, would you be open to that?
Sure, absolutely.
All right. So thank you so much. You're always awesome to speak to and hear about. So I would say there are low-hanging fruits when it comes to cloud, and they are basic fundamental, certifications, including I believe it's for Azure fundamentals, as well as AWS. I can't remember what that was. Cloud practitioner. They are low-hanging fruits. They are not very hard to do, and you can pick up a course on Udemy, both the course and the exam, and you can knock them off pretty quickly, and you can put a certificate on your resume or wherever you want, as well as get some baseline understanding of what's going on. Very, very basic understanding. So for a PM, I would recommend to do that right off the bat. Second, for the PM, I would probably want to, I think Asfar touched on it, understand the cost structure of the cloud. He mentioned CapEx and OpEx model. I would probably explore that for more if it comes to PM, like to understanding what does it cost on-prem versus what would it cost in cloud. That's the two things I would recommend.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor. I mean, this is really important. I think Microsoft has this fundamental requirement within the organization that everybody has to be certified. And a lot of them are kind of questioning as to why do we need to certify, but it addresses the point that Rizwan was mentioning, right? You need to have certification because there are many things that you learn in the process, and it's not too hard. It's just about going through the effort of studying an exam. So I would concur to what Rizwan said. It is really, really important to have certifications. The more the merrier, but you don't need to just go and start doing certifications. Start with the basic cloud practitioner. I think there's a cloud associate engineer in the Google space and Azure fundamentals. There is a lot of data available on public sites, so it's going to be easy, and hopefully you will easily clear it.
That's great. Thank you. So I have a question from cost model point of view. Since I mentioned I have experience more on the on-premise solution, so I have very good understanding of CapEx and OpEx model of on-prem. So what I understand that for cloud, all are basically OpEx model because it's all subscription-based model, right? Is it the same understanding?
That is correct.
Okay. You don't own anything, right? It's all OpEx. You're just paying for subscriptions.
I would say 90% of the time that's the case, unless it's a super secret and super I would not address it to this audience, but there are very limited. Like Germany has its own cloud from AWS because of their HIPAA compliances and stuff. So there are some solutions like Outposts from Amazon, which is actually a small rack. You can actually own it. It's basically a service is extended all the way to the on-prem. So yes, you're getting the cloud resources, but it's actually owned. You don't share the equipment with anybody else. So there are some services coming through, but going back to the question that you were making of OpEx, CapEx, it is always OpEx because it's a pay-as-you-grow model. And the fundamental thing is to put a commit. So salespeople are kind of driving the commit because you do want aggressive discounts to be offered on a certain commitment of the consumption. So in the other side of the business, you actually sell in wholesale and you give aggressive discounts. That's the typical legacy on-prem sales process. But in public cloud space, you actually can't sell the gear, you can't sell the product, you sell the service. And the service is billed on day, week, month, second, depending upon what service you're using. So you can't commit on the quarterly basis. So you actually go on a 30-month spends. So you put a quota for 30 days, and then you sell based on that. So you kind of commit. So the idea is there is a whole different sales team in the cloud space. There's an inside sales rep 1, 2, 3, and then intermediary sales, and then executive sales. So it's different architecture to follow. So someone like you, Ali, as a project manager, understanding that sales methodology as to how a PM integrates with the sales team is really important. because cloud sales team is a lot different than how sales team work in the on-prem side of the world.
Yep, that's right. Thank you.
We are touching almost the time. Please, any questions that you guys have, and feel free to drop any questions. If you guys don't come across any question in this 1 minute, shoot the question on the thread, and I'm sure we'll all be able there. We'll be there to address those questions. I think for the bigger audience who want to go to solution architect, I would say to start learning the technologies and start to build with small application. Build your own application, post in your Git. It's all free. The only thing you need to invest is in your time. That's the only investment you have to do. As I said, it's when I went and I had that conversation with a senior solution architect, he mentioned, I don't see anything in your LinkedIn. And I had everything in my LinkedIn, but what he really meant is, I don't see your work. So that is what he wanted me to present. I still have not posted much work, but that was the message which took me 6 months to realize. Like I tried every single thing. I was down when I met him. I thought he's not adding any value, but he actually meant something very important because it's very competitive industry. And you'll always find people who are very, very smart, who have a ton experience, but that doesn't mean that there are no jobs for you. We've all been there. I'm still learning. I'm actually writing a couple of exams in the next 1 month or so for that fact that I still need to invest time. I still need to learn technologies because there's a lot more to come in the cloud space, especially with COVID. It's just going to grow.
All right. So as for I have one question. If you have time for one last question. Sure. I was thinking of a team model for myself, basically to understand the space, the cloud space. Like I want to, for example, just pick a cloud, Azure, understand what's happening, what are different services, like the streaming model, the batch model, and different architectures, but go deep on one service, go deep, like hands-on. I'm a hands-on, I do code and stuff, but I want to go deep on one. Do you see that as a feasible approach for this?
I see your questions on the thread too, Rizwan, and I think you're doing the right thing. I think that is the most effective way of doing this. On Azure, I don't know what the sessions are called, but AWS reInvent and Google Next. These are, I would say, the first videos that anybody can go and look into. There is definitely similar like that for Azure too. Once you understand the product, then just go look into the public site. The product teams, the product managers have posted those tools. So once you get an understanding of that, that is when you can go and read further and further. And then I'll tell you one thing, guys. And again, just to quick address this. Everyone can create an email address. You guys will get $300 credit on the public cloud. And $300 credit is a lot. It's actually a lot. I did the whole 1 year of deployment because you're not going to keep on running the applications for longer time. You're going to just spin up the application, run it for 10, 15 minutes, and just dissolve it. So you're not going to be paying a lot of dollars. I finished my $300 credit from Amazon, $300 from GCP, and $300 from Azure too. I did not need it to go back and create a new Hotmail or new Gmail to get another 300, but that is something you can do too. So Rizwan, to your point, once you have read the technology, once you understand the product, once you read the code, just go on Azure and deploy the code. The Linux Academy labs do help you with some of the practices, but you're still confined to that particular access and permissions, and you can't do much outside of it. If you take the same code and you deploy it in your free credits training, I'm sure you'll be able to learn much, much more on that particular practice. So I would say try and test actually on public cloud.
Got it.
Okay, guys, I have taken 3 minutes over, but I hope this was helpful. I hope there is some benefit of it. If you guys do have more questions, please feel free to reach me out. I will just post this PowerPoint on WhatsApp so you guys can go back to the links and the names of the tools that I've mentioned here.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye for now.